A year ago, I got this home garden in the hopes of growing some of my favorite plants to have on hand at home. So now that it's been a year, I have some thoughts. So let's talk about it. What have I thought of this garden now that I've had it for a year? Have I made any mistakes? Spoiler alert, yes I have. And ultimately, I'm going to let you know, is it worth it to get one yourself? Now, full disclosure, this video is sponsored by Click and Grow, but I told them I was going to give my honest thoughts and feedback in this video. So while we chat about all that, I'm going to do a little garden refresh. Obviously, you can see that this garden is in desperate need of one, but with a new baby, I haven't had as much time to tend to my garden as usual, which actually brings me to my first point. This garden is perfect for those of us who are not gardeners and don't really have a lot of time to dedicate to a garden. One of my big hesitations with getting a garden like this was that I am not a gardener. I have what I like to call a red thumb instead of a green thumb. I have killed a lot of plants in my day, completely accidentally. I also don't like going through dirt and soil to plant things. So one of the best things about this garden is that it eliminates all that. I can let the plants grow like this, use up what I can, and then when it's time for new plants, I can just easily clean everything out and plant new pods. No potting soil or big mess. Now this thyme here is actually still fresh and perfectly good to use. I am going to save it for a dish tonight. So I'll just cut off the roots and set that aside. Now, one of the mistakes I made over the last year is not cleaning my garden thoroughly. I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit this, but when I first got this garden, I didn't actually know you could take apart all these pieces and wash them separately. I was basically just doing a wipe down of the top every time I changed the pods, which you can do in a pinch, and if your garden isn't super dirty like mine, that will totally work. But if you haven't tended to your garden for a few months, as in my case, then you'll probably want to do a deeper clean. I actually also learned that you can wash these pieces in the dishwasher, which I haven't had to do yet because they do clean up pretty easily just with some soapy water and a sponge, but it's good to know that it's an option if I need to. So let's go ahead and get this all cleaned up and then we will plant our new pods. Okay, now that everything is cleaned up and ready to plant our new pods, I have some herbs here. I have to say that my #1 favorite thing to grow in this garden is definitely herbs. I grew a couple of other plants last year. I think I grew some kale and chard and tomatoes and a couple other things, but I didn't feel that the yield was as good as the herbs. And these are just so nice to have on hand in the kitchen. You can pinch off whatever amount that you need for a recipe, and they're just right there in your kitchen ready to use. I actually used to buy a lot of grocery store herbs, and I noticed that they're kind of pricey for the amount that they give you. And in addition, they always give you like way too much. Like I don't actually need 20 sprigs of thyme for one recipe. So yeah, the grocery store, I just found that I was wasting a lot of the herbs that I would buy and not using them up quickly enough before they went bad. So with this, they're just constantly growing. You take off what you need and then leave the rest to continue growing. Now, my #1 favorite herb that I have grown in the last year has to be basil. I grow it almost every single time I do a change out of these pods. I always reorder the basil from the online store as well because we are just basil obsessed in this house. And 3 little plants do yield a lot of basil. So I am gonna plant some regular basil, but I am excited today to try some of this dwarf basil. This is one that came in the Italian herb mix. So now Click and Grow actually has herb mixes that you can order. So if you don't want just one type of herb, you want a little variety, then you can order their herb mixes. So I actually had to Google what dwarf basil was because I had never heard of it before. Let me know in the comments if you've heard of dwarf basil before. I hadn't. So apparently it grows into a smaller plant that is more bushy, and the leaves are actually stronger in flavor than the basil that we're used to. And apparently it's a must-have for Italian and Greek cuisines. So I'm really excited to grow this and taste it for the first time. Now, one of the other mistakes I made in the last year was planting all 3 3 pods at the same time just because they come in a pack of 3. I thought you should plant all 3 at the same time. So now I'm taking a different approach, which I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, and I'm going to be planting a much bigger variety of herbs. As I mentioned, Click and Grow actually sells these variety packs now. So in the Italian herb mix, we got this dwarf basil. There was also marjoram and thyme. And of course, they have a bunch of other options as well. They have like a fruit and veggie mix. They have an Asian cuisine mix. I think a tea, like a calming herb tea mix. And it just gives you some variety so you don't have too much of one plant. So that's really what inspired me to kind of mix and match some of my pods throughout the garden. Instead of doing all 3 from each package, we're going to plant a variety so that we have a bunch of different herbs all growing at the same time. So I'm just gonna use 2 of the dwarf basil in the front 2 pods and save this 3rd one for another time. And as I mentioned, we do love our regular basil. So I'm going to plant 3 of the basil pods in the back 3. So this whole section here is gonna be basil and I love it. We're just basil obsessed. So besides basil, some of my other favorite herbs are oregano, thyme, cilantro, and chives. Now I grew cilantro and thyme in the last garden and they were so good. And it also grew a lot. As you can see, I have thyme left over. Now, if you've never had fresh thyme before, it is completely different than dried thyme. It is so much more delicious and flavorful. I've actually been taking the fresh leaves and adding them directly into pasta salad because it is just the perfect hint of flavor. So fresh thyme is now also a favorite of ours, but I am gonna plant a couple other different ones today. Marjoram is another one that's a part of that Italian herb mix that Click and Grow sells. So I don't even know what marjoram really tastes like. It's not a spice that I'm very familiar with. So I think because it came in that Italian mix, it will pair nicely with the dwarf basil. But I am gonna have to taste it once it's grown and kind of see what else I could use it in because, to be honest, I don't really know what it tastes like. So I'm really curious about this one. I will have to update you guys once it's grown. And we're just doing 1 marjoram in the front here, right next to the dwarf basil. And then today I'm also going to plant oregano, which I think will pair nicely with the other Italian inspired herbs because I use it a lot in things like pasta sauce and on pizza. And I'm just going to plant 1 pod of this as well. And then lastly, I'm going to plant 2 pods of chives. I've read these are actually really good for your immune system. They're a good source of vitamin C and vitamin K. And they're also just one of my favorite herbs. I love to add them into things like salad dressings, vegan potato salad, on top of avocado toast, and even things like vegan cream cheese. They are perfect for that. And so I think I'm gonna need 2 pods of these. These are one of the first ones to go bad of the grocery store herbs that I buy. I always used to buy chives in the pre-packaged, like already washed containers, and they just always would go bad so quickly. So having my own at home is gonna be great. So after owning this garden for a year, here is my overall analysis so far. The convenience of not having to go to the store for me is a big one. If I need just a small amount of herbs for a dish, I have them right here on my kitchen counter. And like I mentioned before, the ones at the store, they give you a really large quantity. So unless you're using all of that up, you end up throwing some out. And that is just such a waste of money. I love that number one, it's easy. Like I said, I'm not a gardener and I would be way too intimidated to grow a real garden on my kitchen counter. So this just makes it easy. I love that it's conveniently located in my kitchen, so I can just pinch a few leaves off whenever I need them. It's also super convenient to order new plants online and they ship directly to your house. You don't even need to go buy anything at the store. Plus, you don't need to fuss with things like potting soil, pots, watering each plant differently, etc. All of that is taken care of for you with this garden. And there's also a really wide selection of plants to choose from, including fruits, veggies, herbs, and even flowers. I personally love the herbs, but you may want something more like flowers. I mean, imagine this full of beautiful flowers. That would be gorgeous. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, I really love looking at it. Like having plants in your home environment just brings a lot of peace. Just this garden itself is so sleek and well designed and nice to look at, but having something that you've grown yourself and like a little bit of nature inside your home is just so calming. So all in all, is the Click and Grow worth it? For us, it definitely has been. I love this garden. I'm so happy to have had it over the last year. It has been so nice to be able to grow plants all winter long, which is like totally unheard of if you live somewhere where it snows in winter like we do. So if you have been looking for something like this and you want to save a little bit of money on buying one, I do have a discount code you can use. The code LEP for Let's Eat Plants is going to save you money. Of course, I will leave all of those particulars in the description box down below. I highly recommend checking out their website, just looking at the different options they have for gardens and also the wide variety they have of plants you can grow. Also, I'll be doing updates of these plants as they grow on Instagram. So if you're not following me there already, make sure you do that so you can see these as they grow, especially this dwarf basil. I'm so excited to see what that looks like. And as always, if you do have any questions about this garden, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I am excited to chat with you guys there.